Okay, and there's a chat here. Let's see. Oh, good morning. Okay, hi Susie. Yeah, okay, so we left off in chapter 8. We're up to chapter 8. This is a very, very unusual chapter. You'll just forgive me, as like, just when I finally got over everything, and then these allergies are just kicking my tuchus like you cannot believe. And these temperature swings are really good for it. When we on Erev Pesach, that Shabbos when we davened at 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was snow on the ground here.
Yeah.
It was like flurries on the ground, and then by the end of Pesach, it was 80 degrees, and then it was 50 degrees, and now it's 70 degrees. Like, I don't know. So it's not, I don't care what anybody says, it does not affect me well. It just does not. So I'm like, I feel like Rocky at the end of the movie, everything, you could hear it, right?
Move to Israel.
Adrian. Good. It's one of the few times in Israel I don't have to take allergy medication,
That's what
actually.
I'm saying.
It's everybody's solution to the conditioning issue on cancer. If you leave it on heat and then all of a sudden it gets hot, then
That's why you have someone non-Jewish around.
Or you just, that I put it on AC. That's what I'm saying. We put it on.
Yeah, because it was cold. It was very cold though.
it was
Like,
very, and
yeah.
my parents,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they gave it to me.
Baruch Hashem,
We close vents in certain ones.
first world problems.
Right.
But let's finish Gidon. Gidon we're gonna see, and this is really interesting. So in chapter 8, so they had just conquered the kings of most of Midian and a little Amalek that was there also, pushed them out, and then mind you that Gidon is from the tribe of Manasseh, and Manasseh and Ephraim are split into two. So the beginning of chapter 8, we have a little bit of sour grapes, which we see a bit of Gidon's leadership as he turns to diplomacy and a little bit of honey water to allow things to not escalate and not get out of hand. You wonder how current situations would work out in this situation. So Vayomer Elav Ish Ephraim, Ma davar hazeh asisa lanu v'tiltikra os lanu ki halachta lelachem v'midyan vayariven ito b'chazka. So the Ephraim, so note it's Ephraim who is the partner of Manasseh. Now, there's partners and there's partners, there's brothers and there's brothers. So it could be that there's a little bit of a sibling rivalry here, tribal rivalry. We don't see a tremendous amount of tribal unity, which is certainly going to come out later on in the chapter. And they say, what is this thing that you did to us? That you went to fight with Midian. You didn't call us. Like, we got the scraps at the end. Like, what am I? Chopped liver? Okay. So, right? It says, you fight them with strength, and what are we? Vayomer lem, now, there's one way there's a couple ways you can handle this. You could say, oh, be quiet, you ungrate, you're lucky you don't have to fight, or so look at the tack that he takes. He says, what have I done now compared to you? Are not the gleanings of Ephraim better than the vintage of Aviezer? So this term Ololos Ephraim, using this term of a grape, this is actually the Klayuker, Ephraim Lunchitz, wrote a sefer and he called it Ololos Ephraim. The way they explain it, here, I'll just read you the interpretation here, is using the simile of a vintner. He likened himself and his family to the vintage, and Ephraim's role at the end of the battle to the gleanings or the leftover grape. Right, so they have there's like the good part, and then there's the better part. In other words, he's trying to butter them up, or whatever the term is in wine. I actually got a glimpse on the Monday after the second Seder, when we had bottle recycling pickup, and I saw the guys picking up our stuff, and they're like, man, what did you guys was at some kind of party, right? Because it's like 1 million bottles of wine and seltzer and this, and they're like, oh wow, you guys, yeah. So like that's the leftover, because he says, no, you're the Olas Ephraim. So he says, it's your hand. Hashem gave the leaders of Midian, Orev, and Zeb. What could I do compared to you? Meaning, like, you got to finish the job. Hashem sent them. Remember, he drove them out and went through their territory. Hashem, did it through you. Oh, okay. So then it says that their indignation that, calmed down when he made the statement. So, they got upset. It doesn't really have much to do with the story. It's just kind of like an add-in. And we see a kind of few disjunctive topics here that are thrown into this chapter, but something really, really interesting happens at the end.
Are we supposed to know who Aviezer is?
No, I mean, if I'm sure somebody does, like, meaning like that's their lineage. I mean, if you look through all the lines, you can, if you pay attention to the names, I just, I'm being honest, I don't.
Google it.
Yeah, you can, well, you got to, yeah. I mean, that's their lineage. They're from from the house of Aviezer. So, I mean, it's just a nice way of talking to them. He's like, listen to you, you're like better than the like you, Avi. Like, when you speak flowery about somebody, oh, you house of, when they used to speak in the time of the knights and everything, like they talk about their house, your house, this, house, that. I don't know. Okay, but anyway, crisis averted. He speaks nicely, ameliorates them. Fine. Okay. Now, Vayavo Gidon hayardena, overhu shlosh me'as isha she'ito ayefim v'rofim. So then Gidon comes to the Jordan, right? Remember they had chased them over, so now they got to come back. Okay, and mind you that Menashe and they're part of them. Half of them are on that side of the Trans-Jordan, right? Okay, so he comes to the Jordan area. Okay. And he has 300 men who are with him, and they were crossing, they're exhausting, but also Rodfim, they're chasing. So they're in the midst of battle. These are like the remember we talked about how they had so many, and then Hashem had them do this test, and finally whittled it down to these 300 warriors or so. We compared it to the 318 of Abraham, the 300, if you want to look at the movie, 300, really not, maybe they stole it from here, I don't know. But the 300 are there, but they're tired. Right, they've had a long go of it. If I could just trouble you to hit the green button, someone's coming in. Let's see when they come in. Let's see who it is. I see an approach. Oh, going around. She's going around that side. Well, she's going around that side, so it won't matter. She's gonna go on this side. Yeah. No, I think Alicia can get it. So they said, listen, they come and they're tired. Vayomer la'anshe Sukkos. Tenuna kikros lechem la'am asher b'raglai ki ayefim heim ve'anochi rodef acharei zevech v'tzamunim alchei Midyan. So they go to the people of Sukkot. Sukkot is a place that appears a couple of times in Tanakh. We have it by Yaakov Avinu. If it's the same place, if not, I don't know. But anyway, they go to places of Sukkot. They said, give now loaves of bread to the people that, like, could you help feed the soldiers? Now, Gidon is the leader, and he has the status of this rulership in which he can almost enact martial law, as we'll see. And he says, can you give bread to, like, you got to feed the soldiers. And this always happened. Every time that the military passed through, people always had to support the military. They had to put them up, et cetera, et cetera. But he said, please give them bread. They're exhausted. I'm pursuing Zevach and Salmuna, the kings of Midian. Remember, those two kings of Midian, as we saw in the end of the previous Perek, as they finally got their heads, but like, no, others, we're involved in this pursuit. We've been involved in this battle for a long time. They're tired. Can you help them out? And can you feed them? And can you give them what to drink? Okay. So Vayomer, and this is just indicative of, and I guess this is why the previous chapter, the previous sort of interlude is mentioned, is because whereas they said, wait, we weren't involved in this, what do we get? And he's like, no, you got plenty. So now he comes in and he asks them for involvement. And they say, the leaders of Sukkot, Vayomer Sarei Sukkot, Hachav Zevech v'Tzamuna atab yadecha, ki nitain l'tzavach alechem. They said, is this palm of Zevach and Samuna now in your hand that we should give you bread to your legion? Meaning that you don't have them. You haven't finished the job yet. Like, leave me out of it. It's not a nice way to speak to your commander. It's not a way to speak to your leader, right? Okay. So Gidon then, you see, on the one hand, Gidon has to be the politician. On the other hand, Gidon has to be, as the shofet, as to play this, you have to be the law, or you have to be the heavy, as they would say. So Vayomer Gidon lachein b'seis Hashem ezevech v'tzamuda b'yadi v'dashias b'sarchem es kotzei hamidbar v'es habar kanim. Okay, I'm going to remember this. And he says, when Hashem delivers zevech and tzamuna into my hand, I will thrash your flesh with desert thorns and these type of prickly things, because I guess that was indigenous to their area where they are. I mean, anywhere you go in Israel, if you ever walk and you ever go on a hike and you get those things stuck in you, and it's pretty much like everywhere. And the military guys love it because they have to train and they always have to do these jumps and roll around on the floor and all these things. That's why the military uniforms, they have that, they're really thick. But they have to absorb those things and all kinds of other fun things that you have in Israeli terrain. Okay, anyway, but he's like, okay, as I speak, when I come back, you're going to be paying with exactly this terrain. Vayal Misham Pinuel. Then he goes to Pinuel. Again, these are places that we see in Bereshis. Pinuel, Peniel, it's the same thing. Sukkot, Pinuel, with Yaakov Avinu. Vaydaber Lem Kazos, and it's similar, a similar request. We have bread. We need to take care of the troops, okay? And Vaydaber Lem Kazos, Vayanu also Anshe Pinuel, Kasher Nu Anshe Sukkos, and they gave the same response. No, who are you? What am I? Vayomer Gamla Anshe Pinuel Lemor Beshuvi B'Shalom Et Totzet Zamigdal Hazeh. He says to the men of Penuel, when I return in peace, I'm going to break down this tower. Apparently, they have some sort of tower, or maybe it's just a sign of their haughtiness, is that I will take you down. In other words, he did the old Vito Corleone, and he said, right? He said like this, and he went, right? I never forget a favor, okay? But that goes two ways. Fine. So now we got to finish the story, okay? So finally, we have to get hold of them. V'zevach v'tzalmuna bekarkar u'machaneihem imam kamei chameshes eser elef kol anasir mikol machna benekeda v'anof l'mei v'esrim elef ish shalev charef. So Zevach and Salmuna were in Karkar, so they finally catch up to them. So they got some of the kings, they have to get the rest of the Midian kings, and their camps were with them. They had 15,000. All the survivors from the entire camp of the people of the east, for the fallen ones, are about 120,000 fallen, and they have left 15,000. Right? So we look at the number. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. It's a lot. I mean, we when we talk about battle, I mean, certainly in modern warfare, with when lo aleinu, and it kills us every time we say, hutar lefarsem, that you can now publicize there was a casualty this week, a Bedouin soldier from Rafah, and but it's like, we know every single one. And in times of, I mean, if you read history and these battles, I mean, like, I don't know how they even figured out who lived and died, because there were just so many people. I mean, just look at the astounding numbers of people that died in World War II. I mean, it's just, it's overwhelming. So here when they say 100, it started with 120, and now they're down to 15. I mean, it's a lot. So, Vayal Gidon derech hashchuni ba'alim mikedem lenochach v'yagbaha. So he goes by the way of the tent dwellers. There are probably some sort of nomads, Bedouin types. And he struck the camp while the camp was kind of expecting it. They betach means they were secure. They thought it's a long yard. Vayanusu zevach bet samuna ve'yidavach harehem ve'lekodesh shnei malchem midyon es zevach bet samuna v'chol machane hacharid. So Zevach and Salmuna, they flee. He chases after them. He captures the two kings of Midian, Zevach and Salmuna. And then, of course, once he captures them, everybody is tittering. They are fachad. They are afraid. They are terrified. Fine. Vayashav Gidon ben Yoash min ha-milchama mimalei hecharas. So now Gidon ben Yoash, when he uses his full term, his Gidon ben Yoash, now, like, we're going to see, we're going to go to his other name, Yerubbaal, as well. But Gidon ben Yoash, he returns from the battle while the sun was still high. Vayilkad nar me'anshei Sukkot v'yisha alehu v'yichtav elav esari Sukkot z'zkaneh shivim v'shiva ish. So he gets a kid. He goes back to Sukkot. Remember, we have to finish the business. The people of Sukkot didn't help him, and the people of Peniel didn't help him, or Penuel. So he knows it's not the entire population, right? When is it ever the entire population? Well, maybe sometimes it is the entire population. As what we're looking through right now, right? How many? You can make the argument. How many innocent civilians are there in certain places of warfare today? If you want to get into that, but I don't. So he's like, so he finds a kid. Always you find a kid who's gonna rat easy. Like, they like to say, like you look at a group, you say which one of them is gonna fess up, or who's gonna tell the quickest, right? There's another great movie scene, because my head is a steel trap for nonsense, as you know. In the movie, it's a great movie. It's unusual, but it's a great movie. Um, oh shoot, what's it called? I know I can see it in my head with Pierce Brosnan and Rene Russo with the when he's
Stealing the Art?
Stealing the Art, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's called the whatever.
It's a remake.
Yeah, it's a remake. But in it, when they have these Europeans that allegedly they catch doing this breaking in the museum, she looks them over and she's like, "I'll take that one." She like looks them over, like which one she's going to interrogate, and she goes and she breaks them in like 1 second, right? Okay. So he finds a kid. And he's like, a kid's gonna give me the truth. And like before you know it, he says this kid writes down the names of all the leaders and the elders, 77 men. Like, oh yeah, we don't make any decisions for ourselves. Like they do. Okay. So vayavo el anshe Sukkos vayomer hine zevach v'tzalmuna asher chayraftem osi lemar hachav zevach v'tzalmuna atab yadecha ki nitin lan asher chayavim lachem. So he comes to the men, to the leaders, and he's like, remember, you said, oh, where are they? Where you want us to help you? Where are they? Where are these purported people you're chasing? He's like, here they are. Now, he doesn't have their heads. They're still alive. And he says, here's Zevach and Salmuna, about whom you made fun of me, saying, oh, is this the palm of Zevach and Salmuna right in your hand? We should give bread to your exhausted people. So he takes the elders of the city and some desert thorns and these prickly things, and then he beats them, just like he said. And not only that, and this is a little bit further, is that he goes down to the Tower of Penuel and he knocks it down, and then he kills the men of the city. Kills them. Wow. So there is this notion, it's a very hard concept to grasp sometimes, but the notion of what's called mored b'malchus is that that because and we'll see it's going to come into play a little bit in the chapter, is the shofet has sort of the status of a melech, and a melech, a king, is allowed, like I said, to institute sort of martial law, and if someone disobeys or disagrees, he's allowed to punish him as he sees fit. So they always say like the story of David and Bathsheba, right? So we know the story of David and Bathsheba, and did he really do anything wrong with her? He didn't do it. Like from the text itself and the way it looks, it doesn't look very good for David HaMelech. But the Gemara goes out of its way to say that he didn't really do anything technically wrong because he sent the husband Uriel to the front lines, and he was really saying he had him killed. Why was he killed? Because he said he was mored b'malchus, that he disagreed. And by the way, if the king doesn't like you, he could kill you. And by the way, with impunity. That's totally allowed. Like this whole notion of Esther going to the king, and if he doesn't stick out the Shavita Zahav, then she could die. But that was a real thing. If the king, if the jester didn't make a funny joke, off with your head. Now, it's not to say that these were bloodthirsty kings. They did this, but they were well within their rights. So here, in the course of battle, if you didn't obey a king's order to feed the troops, then he says so that's why not only did he knock the tower down, but he even killed some of them. Really, really strong. It kind of gets lost in this little narrative here. But there's clearly a lot that's missing in the narrative here. The Farshim don't have a lot to fill in, but there's a lot going on here. And then we have this episode, this interlude with the kings themselves. So Vayomer el Zevach vel Tzalmuna, Eifo anashim asher haraktem b'tavor, Vayomru kamocha kamohem echad ketor b'nei melech. So he says to these two kings, what kind of men did you kill in Tavor? Like what? Now some were saying that he's just kind of giving this soliloquy of saying, the people that you killed, my troops, these are people that we can never replace. But they said your appearance is like theirs, identical, like the form of the king's sons. In other words, they had this sort of regal stature about them. Vayomar achai b'nei imihem chayashem lu hachiyasem osam lo harakti eskam. He says, these people that you killed, they were my brothers, sons of my mother. Whether it's literally or figuratively, as Hashem lives, had you let them live, I wouldn't kill you now. In other words, you're only going to get what's coming to you shortly in a verse or two because you didn't let them live. War is ugly. So Vayomer liyeser bechoro. He says to Yeser, his firstborn. Now here we have the first notion of progeny in the Shoftim, where the Shoftim, they come and they go. Now, by the way, remind you that he's getting quite a bit of airtime. It's like 3 chapters of airtime Gidon is getting. And now we're saying, okay, well, who comes after Gidon? Oh, it's going to be Yeser, his firstborn. Oh, Yeser, his firstborn. Okay, son, it's time for you to be indoctrinated. It's time for you to make your bones. It's time for you. That's another Godfather term. It's time for you to earn your stripes, whatever term you want to use. And he says to him, Kum harogosam. Okay, son, you want to join? You want to be a leader of Israel? You want to be a judge like your dad? You want to be a shofet? Here's what you got to do. You got to kill these 2 kings. Okay. Velo shalaf anar charbok yarek yodeno anar. But he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He would not draw his sword because he was afraid, and it says, why? Ki odenu na'ar. He was still a na'ar. Now, na'ar is teenager, na'ar is narishkeit, we discussed, right?
But it's also not so smart.
Right, because it's a teenager. And then as you think you know everything, but that's what narishkeit is, right?
Mhm.
You think you know everything, but you don't know anything. You know the famous line of Mark Twain? He said, when I was 15, he goes, my father was so ignorant, he didn't know anything, right? Because by the time I was 20, I was amazed how much the old man learned in 5 years. Something like that. Paraphrasing. So he doesn't want to do it. Now, we'll see maybe in context from the response of the kings themselves about why he wouldn't do it. Vayomer zevach v'tzalmunu kum ataf v'galanim u'faga banu ki ka'ish kivuraso. So Zevach and Tzalmud says, no, you slay us. For as a man is, so is his strength. Meaning, it's not bakavadik for a king to be killed by someone who's not a king. There's certain levels of honor or of protocol, or, even in death, a king has some sort of rights, or there's some sort of, I don't know if you use the word honor, but, they have, and again, if you look at all these medieval stuff, which I don't really spend a lot of time in, but there was a certain honor in killing and how they killed somebody. You kill somebody, facing them from behind, like all these types of things. You don't stab somebody behind, all these types of things. But they said it's not bakavadik that we should have a kid. Maybe that's why he was reluctant to do so. Maybe the Na'ar felt like, who am I to be killing a king? Right? It's not my job. So therefore, it says, Vayakam Gidon vayarog zevach v'salmuna vayikach soharonim asher b'tzavrei gam lehem. This is an interesting thing. So Gidon, he gets up and he kills Zebach and Salmuna, and he took these things that are called the crescents. Soharonim, and a very, very interesting word. Radak says that it's something that they wore, but it was demus yarach. It's in the image of a moon, a crescent. Right? If you look nowadays, right, who has the image of a crescent? And this is kind of like, but
Islam.
right? So our cousins,
Muslimin, بيديوك.
they love the crescents. Okay, so maybe this is a precursor of it, and he keeps it. And he took it and he take the crescents that were on their camels, on the necks. I guess they put it on their animals. I don't know. They have all these funny things they put on their animals. You never see, like, on the horses. They put the nice, like, those things that not just and the jewelry, the covers they put on, these nice things on them. So I guess they did it to their camels as well. I don't know. Maybe they had other relationships. Who knows? But he takes them again. This is like a sign. Oh, by the way. Like, taking you down, taking you away. This is the sign. Fine. So now, like, he's in. So Gidon has defeated them. He quashed. He figured out how to not create a rebellion by talking nicely to his cousins. People that didn't respect him or didn't obey military orders, he took care of them. So now you could say that he has the attention of the people. So Vayomer Ish Yisrael El Gidon Mishol Banu. A very, very unusual request. So now that Gidon has the attention and the respect of the people, they say to him, and they use a very strange word. They say, Mishol Banu. Now, if you wanted to appoint somebody as your leader, what normally would they say? Right, Yimlochaleni. We say, well, with God, like, when's the first time we see that the word Mishol, or one of the first times we see it is with Yosef and his brothers. When he says the dreams to them, they say, Hamaloch Timlochaleni, Hamashol Tim Shol Banu. Moshel means to lord over, means to almost in a very, very controlling way. A melech is a melech, okay, it's a melech, but a melech commands a kingdom and unites the kingdom, and the kingdom prospers. But a moshel, we usually use that for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but a moshel is someone who is going to be somebody that's perhaps more of a tyrant. And it's interesting, that's what they ask for. They say, Mishal, but they say not just you. They're like, oh, okay, you Gidon family, lifetime contract. You got the job. You, your son, your grandson, because you saved us from Midian. Now, this is very, very reactive, of course, as we have seen, is that, when things are going well, we'll behave. And when they're not going well, we're going to cry out to Hashem, and we're going to say, help us, help us, help us. Then help comes, and then we'll behave. And then when things are fine after that, we'll stop behaving. And then the cycle goes on and on and on again. So this is really just another part of it. And remember that Gidon started, he was not one who expected to be chosen. In fact, he wasn't even confident, he wasn't even confident in being chosen. And he asked for these signs, and he kind of grows into it. And we see that he has certain capabilities, and Hashem uses him as his agent. And they say, Mishol. So in keeping with his sort of humble fashion, somebody doesn't expect to have this job. Vayomer alehem Gidon, lo emshol ani bachem, v'lo yimshol b'ni bachem, Hashem yimshol bachem. Do you forget what this was all about? This all started because of Avodah Zarah and these types of things. I'm not going to rule over you. My son is not going to rule over you. Who's going to rule over you? Hashem. Hashem melech, Hashem malach. But it's really Hashem yimshol. Okay, but it says Hashem yimshol. Vayomer lehem Gidol. He says, okay, but then he makes a very, very interesting request, and this shall make your, I don't know, you'll see the reaction that you get from it. So Vayomer lehem Gidon, eshelem mikem she'ela. He says, but I do have one request. I'm not going to roll over you, but I have one request. And here's the one request. Utenuli ish nezem shilolo knizmei zahav lahem kishma'elim heim. Give me a nose ring from the stuff that you collected from the spoils of war. Because remember, they were fighting Midianites. And it says parenthetically, it says, because Midianites really were Ishmaelites, which is interesting because if you want to look, also going back to the story of Yosef, we're going to look at a couple things here. But going back to the story of Yosef, remember when Yosef was sold? Who sold, if I ask you the question, we once went into this in depth. Who sold Yosef?
Ishmaelim.
Ishmaelim, I don't know, right? So it says here that they, Yosef comes to visit them, and they throw him in the pit, they're going to go. Finally, Reuven goes home. Then it says finally, V'hinei archas Yishmaelim. Let's go and sell him to the Yishmaelim. And then it says, V'hamiddanim machru oso Mitzrayim. The Middanim, I'm not sure if it's Midyanim, it's the same. The Mefarshim are not clear if these are indeed the Midianites. They're Medanites, not Midianites, but some say it could be the same. But you have Yishmael, Midyan. Here we have, but he says here, because Yishmael, they were actually Midianites. Midianites were, and by the way, who is the Midian? The priest of Midian is Yisro. And what's Gidon's first son's name? Yeter, who's one of the names of Yisro. Interesting. Okay. And he says to them, listen, give me the nose rings. Vayomer nasonti tein. They said, okay, we'll give it to you. Vayifrsu es hasimla, vayishlichu shama ish nezem shlalo. They've spread out a garment. Everybody throws a nose ring from what they had collected from the spoils. Vayhi mishkal nizmei hazahav asher sha'al elaf u'shva me'o zahav. Levad min has-soharanim ha'atifos v'gdei ha'gaman shel malchei Midian, levad min ha'nakos asher b'tzavrei gam lehen. So the weight of the nose rings was 1,700 gold dinars. I guess that's a lot. Aside from all the crescents and the pendants and the purple garments that were the wool garments that were worn by the kings of Midian, and aside from the chains that were on the necks of their camels. Okay, and what does he do with it? Vayas also Gidon le'efod vayatzeg also be'iro be'afra be'ofra vayiznu kol yisrael acharav sham v'hila Gidon le'veitel l'mokesh. So he's going to make it into an ephod, which, by the way, when did we first see the ephod? The Kohen Gadol, right? The Kohen would wear an ephod, and it was meant to combat Avodah Zarah. And he makes it. He's like, okay, I'm going to make this as a reminder of what I did here. He makes this as a reminder. He hung it up in the city in Ofra, and eventually, but what happened? Everybody eventually began to worship this, right? So now, what is this like when you read this? What are you thinking of?
I see a lot of parallels with Yosef.
Yeah, I think that you're just repeating it.
Yosef and what? The Ched Egel, right? Let's go to the videotape. Parshat Kisisa. We're already in Vayikra. Can you believe that? It's already summer. Summer's over. It's almost. We have to start doing tshuva. It's almost Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah. Sukkot. Okay, so the people come to Aharon because Moshe's delayed, and they say, we don't know what happened to him. So what does Aharon say? He says, Pirku nizmei hazahav asher baznei nishechem. Take out nizmei hazahav. What does he ask for here? He says, I'll ask for nizmei hazahav lahem. We have nizmei hazahav, and bring them to me. Vayisparaku. And they took them off. And all the things, vayakam miyadam vayatzer osa b'cheret. And then Aaron, he fashioned them. First of all, they took everything from their hands, they bound it up in a cloth, and they fashioned it into a molten, right? B'cheret. He put it in a cloth here, the way they translate. Here also, basimla. So now, let's compare and contrast. Who's asking for what in which story? So in the story of the Egel, using, let's say, the Ramban's traditional, maybe I could possibly wrap my head around it approach, which is no matter how you spin it, it's a very hard chapter to understand. But let's say the people panicked. They didn't want another God. They wanted another Moshe. And Aaron was trying to create this delay tactic and show them that that's not really your leader. This should just be a reminder that's not your leader. Maybe that's exactly what Gidon's trying to do. I'm trying to remind what not to do. And what happened? In both cases, a reminder of what not to do turned into exactly, what happened, the wrong thing, the worst thing to do. And that's what happens here. On the one hand, though, the instigator of the Egel story were the people. Here, the instigator of the story is Gidon himself, albeit maybe with this. But the person who fashions it maybe had the same intentions, but it's an interesting comparison, an interesting contrast. But the bottom line is that whenever we see something like, oh, I'm gonna take some stuff and make it into a thing, we're like, and we should always have that reaction in Tanakh that when somebody wants to take some stuff, especially if it's gold, no, like no gold. And Ad Hayom Hazeh, we say that there is no. The Gemara says we just had in the Daf Yomi that there's no sin that we have. It doesn't have like a shmek tabak. Doesn't have a little bit of something of the golden calf in it. Hashem, even though He forgave us, it's like when you forgive somebody, but it's like if you would ask my mother right now and tell you what I did when I was 2 years old to her chandelier hanging in the hallway. We had in the house I grew up, they had this big winding staircase, and in the middle they had this big giant chandelier, which was like a prized possession of my mother. And she would go up on a ladder and polish every crystal. It was high. It was high. It was 20 feet high. It's big, round balcony with a staircase going down the side. And apparently, I took a teddy bear and broke her chandelier by throwing it at the chandelier. Now, I fully disagree with this. I have no recollection. There are no. My mother to this that I broke her chandelier. Of course, she forgave me and she raised me and this and that. But when I bring it up, it's still right. So that's kind of how Hashem feels with the golden calf. Yeah, I forgave you, which is one of the reasons on Yom Kippur we don't wear gold. You say Ein Kateger Nasa Sanega. We don't want to we're on trial. Like the last thing you want to do is remind God, oh hey, check out my gold Rolex. You like my bling. Right. It's not really appropriate. Okay. So this is kind of like and it's just a sad thing that after everything that he accomplished, and he had very good intentions. And what happens is it becomes a snare into his household. They wanted his household to take over. He says, no, you worship only God, and I'm going to make a remembrance that you worship only God by giving you something that's not God. Okay. And it becomes a snare for him. And then we kind of like finish off Gidon into the sunset and the rest of his life story. Which again, this is a very, very detailed description of the beginning of his epic through his life and even until he dies. And really interesting. Vayichana Midyan lifnei bnei Yisrael v'yos l'seis rosham v'tishkor haaretz arba'im shana b'Megidon. Okay, so his career is over because he accomplished peace. They were no longer tortured by the people of Midyan and the kings of Midyan. They didn't bother them. It was quiet for 40 years, the rest of the days of Gidon. All right, so what do you do when things are quiet and you have the days of your life to play out? Right, I always ask you a question like, if you could retire today, what would you do? Well, some people go to the Galapagos Islands, and New Zealand, all these wonderful travel trips, right? But ask you, like, what would you do if I had to retire right now? I have no idea. I mean, I do know, but I would sit and learn in Kolo. That's what I would do. So Vayelech, look at this. Vayelech Yerubbaal ben Yoash Vayeshev beVeiso. Look how he's known now. He's not called Gidon. He's called Yerubbaal because that's how he really how he came into his position, because he destroyed the idols of his father. So now we're going back to that to say, like, he's not the leader, he's not the Moshel, he's not the warrior, he's not the great figure, he's Yerubbaal. He's the guy that breaks idols because he stands up for what's right and fighting Hashem's wars and standing up against Avodah Zarah. So Yuval, he sits at home. What do? You sit into the sunlight, to the sunset. You have lemonade on the porch. You smoke your pipe. What do you do? So here's what he does. Well, I'll tell you what he was doing. He had 70 sons or 70 children. Because he had a lot of wives. So that'll keep you busy, I guess, right? So he moved out to Utah. He started a whole like big love situation or whatever. I don't know. Remember that show? And Bill Paxton. I think he died, didn't he? It's possible. I think so.
Also,
I can Google
70, there's so many parallels.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, you ever wonder if they mean it literally? Like, does 70 really mean 70, or you had a lot? Or 70-ish? Or, I mean, it's not 10. It's 70.
But why write 70 if it wasn't 70? Like, why be so specific?
We're
I don't-
trying it to be Yosef's.
No, it could be like 72. Like, it's 70 people. 70 came into Egypt. Right? Maybe that's a form of redemption. It's a great theory to think about. Upilak Shoasher B'Shchem Yodalogam Hiben. So, like, this is great. He had a lot of wives. He had 70 kids. Oh, and he also had a concubine.
Nice life.
Right? Like, I'm just trying to like if you have that many wives, why would you have a concubine? Or if you have a concubine, why would you have that many wives? Right? Yeah. There was a whole movement. I remember back in the early 80s where they were trying to encourage like men to like take concubines or something. The word itself just is not welcoming. I don't know about you. Like, it just has to me, it's just like concubine. It's just like, ugh. I don't know. It's not a nice word. Pelegish is not much better either. And she had, and Vayasem es Shemo Avimelech. And this is going to be important because we're going to see the next chapter about Avimelech. But here, what's interesting right away is, what do you see that's interesting about how he's called?
Melech.
Right? Avimelech, that's a little bit arrogant.
Mhm.
Because he's being known here. He's no longer Gidon and the Shoftim. He's just Yuval. But even so, look at how he's called. It's very subtle. But if you look carefully in the verbiage of the pasuk, it says, how do we normally name somebody? We say, Vayikra et Shemo. And he called them, she called them, they called him. Here it says, Vayasem es Shemo. It's almost like nobody
He declared.
placed it upon him. Like, this is who you're going to be. Not, and this is what you're going to be called. Vikar Shmo Yisrael. No, Vayasem. Placed it, like, forced it on him.
And the other son was Yeter, kind of left over.
Yeter, or it could be more, right? So then, Vayamas Gidon ben Yoash b'Seva Tova, vayikaver b'kever Yoash aviv b'Afra avia Ezri. So he dies. But Seva Tova is always a good way. When the Torah says somebody dies b'Seva Tova, that's always a very, very good thing. That he died in like peacefully, old age, and he was buried by Yoash. Again, this is the father. Here's the Avi Ezri. In other words, that's their family name. They're the Avi Ezrites. Vayhi kasher meis Gidon vayashuv b'nei Yisrael vayiznach re'eh ba'alim vayisimu lehem ba'al bris le'elohim. Ayvei. What happens? He dies. So he 40 years of quiet, but now he's gone. So the children of Israel, they went and they worshipped the Baal, and they set Baal Berith as a god for themselves. It's bad enough that they worship, but sometimes we worship, we do things wrong, but we still remember God. Here they didn't even remember God. That's like a next level worse. And they didn't remember Hashem, their God, who saved them from all their enemies from around. And the worst thing is, so there's not worshiping God. There's worshiping idols. That's bad. There's not remembering God. But what's almost have to say, what's the worst thing? Is they had no hakar satov. They had no even sense of giving thanks to the kindness, commensurate with all the goodness that he had done with Israel. That's like the worst thing that you could do, is to forget those that got you where you are, like to disregard that. God's like,
They murdered his children.
yeah, that happens. When they forget, it's like, but why do they do that? Because they don't want to remember. Because the children serve as a constant reminder of, that's what all kings do. They don't want anybody to take revenge for this and that, but also, out of sight, out of mind. God says it to say, like, God's like, yeah, you disrespect me, I'll get over it. Like I'm a big boy, I'm a big God. But if you forget Hakar Satov, and you have to give Hakar Satov even when it's from unlikely places or places where you don't want to give it, which is a very hard thing, by the way, for a lot of people in our communities to do that. Especially when you look in the political realm, it's like this person can only be good and this can only be bad. And it's never like a bifurcation of like, sometimes they do good things, sometimes they do bad things, or sometimes even if I don't like them or I don't vote for you, this and that, you could do good things. It's very hard for us to do that, which is challenging. And it's something that we're working against all the time. So anyway, that's fascinating story of Gidon.
People are worshiping. And
The gold rings or whatever, this thing he made, yeah.
People are worshiping, and then it's just.
Then they go straight. It was like a feeder. It was like a feeder drug.
It took 40 years for them to sink, and he just hung out.
Everything was fine, but as soon as he's gone, that's what happens. The teacher leaves the classroom, right? That's what happened, and this is the pattern, and it's just getting worse and worse. Okay, now we're gonna have next the story of Avimelech, which is also not going to be great, but really it's just interesting to see how much airtime Gidon gets. We don't really hear so much about him. Really, really fascinating stuff. So we'll have it there. I just wanted to. I'm just going to stop recording though. Okay.